Rain hammered the French countryside like artillery from the heavens, turning every road into a river of mud. The convoy had stalled again. Engines choking, tempers flaring, morale sinking. Then, through the downpour, a small boxy jeep sputtered forward, coughing smoke and slinging muck, its little engine screaming as it pulled a half-ton truck out of the ditch. The men burst out laughing, not in cheer, but disbelief. "That tin can?" one shouted. "You kidding me?" Sergeant Tom Harlow spat tobacco and smirked, calling it a toy for Boy Scouts. PVT. Danny Mercer grinned, mud caked up to his ears, patting the hood like it was a faithful dog. Lieutenant Evelyn Ward watched from beneath her helmet, eyes sharp with thought. She saw what others didn't. A machine that refused to quit. The laughter echoed through the storm, swallowed by thunder as the jeep stood shivering in the rain like something alive. None of them knew yet that the joke would become their salvation and the enemy's obsession. Because in war, even the smallest thing can change everything. Morning broke slow and gray over the French hills. The laughter from the night before still echoed in the squad's talk, but now it came with respect. The little jeep sat steaming by the tents, dented and streaked with dried mud, like a prize fighter after the bell. Sergeant Tom Harlow crouched by its wheel, tightening bolts and muttering about miracles on 4 tires. Danny Mercer walked up carrying coffee tins, calling it Jenny, as if the name alone gave it a soul. Lieutenant Evelyn Ward watched the 2 men, sketching notes in her book, already writing the jeep into her plans for the next push east. The other soldiers teased Danny for naming it, but even they couldn't hide the grin when the engine coughed to life. Somewhere between the laughter and the smell of gasoline, they'd started believing. Not just in the machine, but in the strange luck it carried. By noon, the column was rolling again, engines growling through ruined villages and fields that smelled of burnt oil. The jeep led the way this time, small, fast, and stubborn. Danny drove like it was a race, weaving past wrecks and potholes. Tom barked orders, gripping the windshield frame while Evelyn sat perched in back with a radio, calm amid the shaking. The men behind them started calling over the radio. "Follow Jenny. She finds the road." What began as a joke had turned into a call sign, and for the first time the convoy moved faster than the weather. In that moment, the jeep wasn't a toy anymore. It was a compass. That night, the wind howled over their new position. The squad parked the jeep near the edge of a ruined farmhouse, its headlights off, but engine ticking softly like a heartbeat. Danny sat on the hood, cigarette glowing in the dark, telling stories about home. Tom leaned against a wall, half listening, half lost in thoughts of the men they'd buried last week. Evelyn approached quietly, wrapping her coat tighter, and told them command had noticed their little jeep. "They think we're onto something," she said. Tom chuckled. "Guess laughter's contagious." Danny smiled faintly, tapping the jeep's hood. "Then let them laugh," he said. "Jenny don't care." In the quiet after that, only the wind answered. Before dawn, orders came. Scout ahead of the column, check the bridge at Marcy Ridge. The fog was so thick it felt like smoke. Tom rode up front this time, rifle across his lap, while Danny coaxed the jeep through the ghostly mist. Evelyn manned the map, whispering bearings into Tom's ear. The world was silent, but for the sputtering engine and the crunch of wet gravel. When they reached the ridge, they froze. The bridge was half collapsed, and across it, through the haze, the silhouette of a German truck idled. A voice crackled on their radio. "Don't move." Tom's hand went for his rifle. The jeep's headlights flickered. For a heartbeat, everyone stopped breathing, even the machine. They rolled out before sunrise, fog crawling low over the valley like breath from the earth. The orders were simple. Locate an injured squad pinned near St. Rene and bring them back alive. The terrain was a graveyard of burned tanks and shattered trees, and no one believed a jeep could make it through. But Tom just said, "We've got Jenny." And that was enough. Danny gripped the wheel, bouncing over shell holes, the little machine whining but never faltering. Evelyn's calm voice cut through the static, calling coordinates as gunfire echoed in the distance. When they finally spotted the wounded men crawling from a trench, Jenny plowed straight through mud and bullets, hauling them aboard. By the time they returned to camp, the laughter had vanished. Now, everyone whispered her name like a prayer. Back at camp, silence followed their arrival. The Jeep's paint was torn, windshield cracked, its engine wheezing like a man who'd seen too much. Danny patted the dented hood, whispering thanks. Tom climbed out, face streaked with grime, trying not to show how much he respected the machine now. Evelyn reported the success to command, but even she paused to glance back at the little vehicle that had somehow outrun hell. The men from other units gathered around, asking, "That the Jeep they call Jenny?" Danny only smiled. "Yeah," he said softly. "She doesn't quit." And in that moment, something changed. Belief had replaced laughter. That night, rain returned. Soft at first, then relentless. The campfire hissed as Danny worked on the Jeep's engine with a wrench, the light flickering across his face. Tom sat beside him, wrapping bandages on his arm, muttering how the damn thing's got more guts than half the platoon. Evelyn joined them quietly, bringing a flask and 3 cups. They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, thunder rolled like distant gunfire. Danny whispered, "You think machines remember?" Evelyn looked at the Jeep and said, "Only if we do." For a long time after, nobody spoke. The war roared somewhere far away, but here in the rain, 3 souls and 1 machine shared something close to peace. 2 days later, the squad was ordered to deliver supplies to a cut-off unit beyond the river. The road was gone, bombed to pieces, but Jenny found a path through the fields. Tom guided from the hood, shouting directions through smoke and mud. Evelyn clung to the radio, reporting every step, while Danny drove like a man possessed. Shells fell in the distance, shaking the earth, but somehow the Jeep rolled on. When they reached the stranded troops, Tom jumped down, laughing for the first time in weeks. "Told you she had legs," he shouted. Even the wounded soldiers laughed as they loaded crates onto Jenny's back. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was the heartbeat of the company. Word spread fast. Other units started calling for that miracle Jeep whenever terrain or danger made others hesitate. Tom tried to downplay it, but even he felt pride when he saw her parked among bigger machines, scarred, patched, and somehow alive. Danny painted her name on the side. "Jenny." Evelyn smiled, tracing the letters with her glove. "Now she's official," she said. The next mission would take them deeper into enemy ground, and none of them knew how bad it would get. But night under the stars, with Jenny's engine clicking softly in the dark, they believed they could go anywhere together. By midsummer, the mud had hardened into dust, and the war had taken on a rhythm. Brutal, endless, mechanical. Yet, through the chaos, stories traveled faster than gunfire. Jenny the Jeep, they called her now. The one that never broke down. The one that went where tanks failed. In field hospitals, soldiers swore she had saved them. In taverns, they joked she was bulletproof. Danny laughed when he heard the rumors, but deep down he liked that people believed in her. Tom pretended not to care, though he cleaned her engine more carefully each night. Evelyn wrote a report to headquarters calling her a morale asset, but she left out how the sight of that Jeep made her feel. That maybe courage could be built from bolts and wheels after all. It started as rumor, then reached the wrong ears. A German patrol near Argonne intercepted Allied chatter about a Jeep named Jenny that had slipped through enemy lines 3 times in 1 week. Captain Franz Adler heard it first. Tall, meticulous, with the patience of a hunter. "A myth," his adjutant said. Adler only smiled. "Every myth has a truth," he replied. Across the valley, Jenny was hauling supplies again, her tires slicing through chalky dirt. Danny didn't know that somewhere, an enemy officer was already marking a red circle on his map. Not around a fort or a bridge, but around a jeep. Adler's obsession grew. Reports came of a small American vehicle slipping through ambushes, vanishing before capture. He began calling it der Geisterwagen, the ghost cart. Meanwhile, Jenny and her crew continued their missions, unaware of the legend forming around them. One afternoon, as they crossed a field littered with twisted metal, Danny joked that Jenny could outlive them all. Tom didn't laugh. "Machines don't die," he said, staring ahead. "Men do." Evelyn glanced between them, feeling the weight of his words. The jeep jolted over a shell crater, mud flying in for a heartbeat. It felt like the war itself was watching. When they reached the town of Reveal, the squad was met with applause from a platoon that had been stranded for days. Kids ran beside the jeep, shouting, "Jenny, Jenny," as if it were a person. Danny tossed candy from the back while Tom waved awkwardly, trying not to smile. Evelyn watched from her seat, realizing this was more than myth now. It was hope on 4 wheels. Later that night, while the men celebrated, she stayed by Jenny's side under a broken street lamp, hand resting on the warm metal. "You've done more than most of us ever will," she whispered. Somewhere far away, Adler listened to intercepted radio chatter and smiled. The hunt had begun. That night, rain swept through Reveal. The squad huddled in a barn Jenny parked just outside, her headlights faintly glowing through the mist. Danny couldn't sleep. He sat behind the wheel, hand resting on the gear shift, staring into the dark. Tom appeared, silent, handing him a cigarette. "You ever think she's got a soul?" Danny asked. Tom shrugged. "Maybe," he said. "But if she does, it's because you gave it to her." Evelyn stepped out moments later, coat flapping in the wind, and said softly, "We move east at dawn. Adler's division is nearby." Lightning flashed, and for a second, Jenny's shadow stretched across the barn wall like a ghost. Dawn crept over the ridgeline like a thief, pale and cold. Jenny rumbled east with her familiar trio aboard, Tom silent as stone, Danny humming low, Evelyn scanning the map. Ahead, thin trails of smoke marked German movements. They didn't know Adler was waiting, watching through binoculars from the hills. He'd studied their routes for days, learning the pattern of their missions, predicting where they'd go next. "We'll take the legend alive," he told his men. Down below, Danny wiped dust from Jenny's dash, whispering, "We've been through worse, girl." The jeep's engine coughed, then steadied, almost as if answering. Somewhere between steel and heartbeats, destiny had drawn its lines. By noon, the trap was set. Adler's troops had mined the road and hidden among the trees. Jenny rolled closer, her tires crackling over gravel. Unaware. Evelyn felt something wrong. The air too still. The birds too quiet. "Stop," she whispered. But it came too late. A mine exploded behind them, dirt and fire swallowing the sky. Danny slammed the brakes. Tom jumped out firing blindly, yelling for cover. Evelyn crawled to the radio, calling for help, static screaming back. Through the smoke, silhouettes moved, German helmets glinting. Danny floored the accelerator, Jenny roaring forward through flames and gunfire, leaping the ditch like a living thing. The trap had sprung and failed. The jeep limped into a grove of trees miles from the blast zone, engine whining like a wounded animal. Danny cut the motor and sat there trembling. Mud streaked across his face. Tom checked his rifle, then his men, all alive. Evelyn knelt beside Jenny, inspecting the damage. Shattered mirror, bullet holes along the hood, a leaking fuel line. "She's hurt bad," Danny murmured. Tom put a hand on his shoulder. "So are we," he said. They patched what they could with tape and prayer. As night fell, Evelyn looked toward the north, where faint lights glowed on the horizon. "He'll come again," she said softly. Danny didn't answer. He just whispered to Jenny, "We'll be ready." Adler raged at his failure. In his tent, maps covered the walls, each marked with red arrows, each leading to a single name, Jenny. His officers avoided his gaze, fearful of the quiet fury behind it. "It is not about victory anymore," he said coldly. "It is about pride." Meanwhile, Tom's squad hid in an abandoned mill. Jenny parked beside them like a loyal dog. Danny slept against her fender, exhausted. Evelyn and Tom planned their next move, a night crossing through enemy patrol lines. "We'll ghost our way out," she said. Tom nodded, glancing at the jeep. "Seems fitting for a legend." Outside, the moonlight painted Jenny silver like armor forged from myth. They moved under darkness, Jenny's engine barely whispering. The road wound through a valley of broken farmhouses, mist hanging low. Tom led from the passenger seat, scanning the tree line. Evelyn followed her compass by flashlight. Danny's eyes burned from exhaustion, but his grip stayed sure. Suddenly, headlights appeared behind them. Adler's convoy. Bullets shredded the silence. "Floor it," Tom yelled. Jenny roared, bouncing over craters, sparks flying as metal scraped stone. Evelyn fired a flare that burst red across the night sky, signaling their allies. Adler's trucks closed in, but Jenny leapt across a collapsed bridge, landing hard on the far side. The Germans stopped short, engines growling. Danny looked back and grinned. Jenny had flown. They had driven for 3 days without rest, the jeep's frame rattling like bones. The skies were gray, the land silent. Too silent. Tom felt it first. That quiet before disaster. "We're being herded," he muttered. Evelyn checked her compass, frowning. Danny tried to keep his spirits up, humming through cracked lips. Jenny's engine sputtered, then steadied like a heartbeat refusing to die. Ahead lay a narrow pass between cliffs. "Shortcut," Danny said. Tom didn't answer. When they entered, the sound of the engine bounced back at them, echoing like ghosts. Then came the first explosion. Not ahead, but above. Rocks fell. Gunfire erupted from both sides. The trap had closed. The ambush was merciless. Bullets shredded canvas, sparks flying from metal. Tom shouted orders, his voice lost in the roar. Danny spun the wheel hard, trying to reverse, but the path behind was blocked by fire. Evelyn's radio crackled, then went dead. She grabbed her pistol, firing into the cliffs. Tom's shoulder jerked back. Hit. Danny screamed his name, but Tom waved him on. "Go!" he barked. Jenny tore through the chaos, smoke trailing from her hood, tires grinding over stone. For every turn they took, Adler's men closed in tighter. Somewhere through the haze, the captain himself watched from an armored car, whispering, "At last, the hunt was over. The capture had begun." Jenny finally gave out near a river bend, her engine choking in smoke. Danny slammed the brakes, coughing from fumes. Tom, bleeding badly, tried to stand but collapsed. Evelyn tore strips from her jacket to bind his wound. The river roared nearby, swollen with rain. Danny turned the key again and again, whispering, "Come on, girl, just one more." But Jenny stayed still, her spirit finally exhausted. Headlights appeared through the trees. Adler's convoy. "They're here," Evelyn said quietly. Tom looked at Danny. "Run!" Danny shook his head, jaw clenched. "Not without her." The sound of boots drew closer, metal on stone. Jenny's headlights flickered once, like a heartbeat, then went dark. They were taken at dawn. The jeep, chained to a truck, rolled behind them like a prisoner. Tom's arm was bound, blood seeping through his sleeve. Danny kept his eyes on Jenny, fury burning behind the exhaustion. Evelyn sat silent between them, staring straight ahead. Adler approached, polished boots crunching over gravel. "So," he said in perfect English, "this is the famous Jenny." Danny lunged at him, but 2 soldiers held him back. Adler circled the jeep, touching the bullet holes with fascination. "Stronger than expected," he murmured. like its crew. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that promised no mercy. For the first time, the legend belonged to someone else. That night, locked in a barn, the three sat in silence while rain drummed on the roof. Jenny stood outside under guard, her chains glinting in lantern light. Danny pressed his forehead against the wooden wall, whispering, "I should fixed her faster." Tom, his strength fading, said softly, "You did all you could." Evelyn leaned against the door, listening to the distant sound of the Jeep's engine being tested by German mechanics. "They'll use her," she said, voice hollow. "Make her theirs." Tom opened his eyes just long enough to say, "Let them try." Outside, thunder rolled, and for a moment it almost sounded like Jenny roaring back to life. At dawn, Adler's engineers stripped Jenny bare under a gray sky. They studied her engine, copied her frame, painted over her name in black. Danny watched through the barn window, fury twisting in his gut. Tom sat pale against a post, breathing shallowly, while Evelyn whispered plans she didn't yet believe in. "They'll drive her tomorrow," she said, "south to the depot." Danny's eyes stayed fixed on the Jeep. "Then tomorrow," he whispered, "she drives for us one last time." Outside, Adler stood proudly beside the repainted vehicle, unaware of the small explosive Danny had hidden under the passenger seat days ago. His last act of defiance waiting to wake. Night fell heavy with rain. Evelyn found a loose board in the barn wall, and by its crack they slipped out. Tom could barely stand, but Danny hauled him up, one arm around his shoulder. The guards smoked by the gate, laughing at stories. Thunder covered the sound of footsteps as the three crawled toward the convoy yard. Danny's eyes locked on Jenny, chained, repainted, but still hers. He slipped beneath her chassis, fingers finding the wire head rig days before. Evelyn counted softly. 5, 4. When the last number left her lips, lightning struck. Blinding white, Danny pulled the wire. The ground shook. Jenny's roar became thunder's twin. The blast tore the depot open. Flames rolled across fuel drums. Soldiers screamed orders lost to chaos. Jenny, now half consumed by fire, crashed sideways into a truck loaded with ammunition, and the valley bloomed with light. Danny dragged Tom through the smoke while Evelyn fired at shapes in the haze. Behind them, Adler staggered from the wreckage, face lit orange, eyes blazing with disbelief. "The legend destroyed itself," he rasped. But even he knew it wasn't destruction. It was defiance. When the last echo faded, only the twisted frame of the Jeep remained. Burned, blackened, but unbroken. They ran until their legs failed, collapsing in a field of tall grass miles from the blaze. The sky glowed faintly behind them, a pillar of smoke marking where Jenny had fallen. Tom lay on his back, chest heaving. Evelyn pressed her ear to the ground, hearing distant rumble. Allied guns, moving closer. Danny sat apart, staring toward the smoke, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face. "She did it," he whispered. Evelyn nodded. "She got us home." Tom smiled faintly before passing out. For the first time in weeks, Danny let himself breathe. Jenny was gone, but the war had turned. By noon, Allied troops found them, smoke-streaked, half-conscious but alive. Medics carried Tom to a truck, while Danny refused to let go of the broken metal plate he'd torn from Jenny's wreckage. It still bore her name, half-melted but readable. Evelyn watched the column of prisoners march past, Adler among them, his face blank with defeat. "You lost your prize," she said as she passed him. He didn't reply. Danny turned the plate in his hands and smiled faintly. "She's still with us," he whispered. In the end, the legend hadn't been captured. It had chosen when to end, and when to live forever. Years later, the fields had grown green again where fire once burned. In a small French village, Children played near the rusted frame of a Jeep, displayed behind glass. Danny visited every year. Gray now at the temples, his old uniform jacket hanging loose on his shoulders. He'd stand quietly, one hand resting on the metal, as if greeting an old friend. Tourists read the plaque. Jenny, the most captured prize of the war. But Danny didn't care for the words. He remembered mud, laughter, the hum of her engine under his hand. He remembered what she gave them. A reason to keep moving when the world was falling apart. Tom never came back from the hospital, but his name lived in every story Danny told. Evelyn stayed with the army, rising through ranks and earning medals that gathered dust on her shelf. Yet, once each spring she sent a postcard to the little museum with only 3 words. Keep her running. Danny would smile at that, sometimes sending a note in return. Their war had ended, but their bond, forged in mud and fire, never truly did. And every time a new visitor looked at Jenny, they were reminded that courage isn't measured in size or rank. Sometimes it's just 4 wheels that never stopped trying. One evening, a young mechanic at the museum found Danny in the workshop, sleeves rolled up, tinkering with the Jeep's engine. "She's done enough, sir," the boy said. Danny smiled without looking up. "She ain't done yet." The engine sputtered, coughed, then came alive in a slow, throaty rumble. Dust lifted off her frame like breath returning. The boy stared in disbelief, but Danny only whispered, "Told you she remembers." Outside, thunder rolled across distant hills, the same low growl that once meant war. But tonight, it sounded like home. Later that night, Danny sat in the driver's seat one last time. The leather was cracked, the mirrors clouded, but the feeling was the same. That strange comfort of belonging. He closed his eyes and could almost hear Tom's laugh, Evelyn's steady voice, the endless rhythm of tires against dirt. "We made it," he whispered. Outside, the town bells rang midnight. Danny left the keys on the seat, saluted the rusted hood, and walked into the quiet street. Behind him, a single droplet of oil hit the floor with a soft echo, like a heartbeat. Years later, the Jeep was moved to a national memorial. School children pressed their faces to the glass, whispering about the machine that never gave up. A voice recording played beside her. Danny's own, recorded before he passed. "It's not about engines or metal," he said. "It's about what you keep moving for." The camera panned across the Jeep's rusted body, the name Jenny faint but unforgotten. Outside, the wind blew across endless rows of white crosses. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, and it sounded a lot like laughter.